And my special person for this week is Aileen Henderson. This is Margaret Lee, Special People and Places. I am on the University of Alabama campus at the Smith Hall, and this is the Alabama Museum of Natural History. Smith Hall is named. Aileen Henderson has completed this book in 2011 on the life of Dr. Smith. Aileen, introduce us to your daughter here. Your daughter's name.
My daughter is Ann Weston, and she lives in Costa Rica in the rainforest.
Oh, my goodness. We're so happy to have you with us today. And the new director of the museum is John Friel.
John, I started here in March, coming from Cornell University, and I'm really happy to be here. This is my first time actually living in Alabama, so it's a great experience for me, and this is a great institution to be associated with, and I am fascinated with Eugene Allen Smith and hope to learn some more about him today.
This is wonderful. Aileen, I'll show your book right here. Aileen was at Walker College campus of Bevel State University in Jasper. I noticed in the paper, and when I saw geologist, it really piqued my interest. And I cannot believe this man. But it's too bad, but I'm so glad you were the very one to do this biography of this man, Aileen. I mean, it's been 4 decades since his death. Did the university, did they approach you to do this project, or did you kind of want to do it? Do you remember?
No. During the 1930s, in the Depression, my father lost his job because the mines closed. And he had to go on WPA, Works Progress Administration, and he was assigned to Smith Hall. A crew was engaged in typing Dr. Smith's journal. They would discard the yellow second sheets when they were finished, and my father chose among those the ones that were most interesting about Smith's travels over Alabama, and the ones that were funny because Smith had a great sense of humor, and he certainly met with much humor as he went about Alabama. Poor as it was, now he saw how devastated Alabama was by the Civil War, and he realized the poverty of the people could not be cured with agriculture, and he realized that the state geologist position must be reactivated because Alabama could use its natural resources to get back on its feet. And he agitated with the legislature, reestablished the position of state geologist, and the legislature finally appointed him in 1873 as our second state geologist. Michael Toomey, an Irishman, very able man, had been our first state geologist, but he died in late 1850s, and Alabama had not replaced him.
That's incredible, isn't it, for that many years? But thank God Dr. Smith came along.
He was in Mississippi. When he went to, after the war, he borrowed money from well-to-do northern relatives and went to Germany to study in the great museums, the great universities of Germany, and came home with a doctoral degree, but he graduated with the highest honors, and he came home with his degrees, with fluent in languages. He was a skilled fiddler, and he loved the culture of Europe. He was steeped in art museums and all the other aspects of European culture. So he was hired by Mississippi. For 3 years he was their state geologist. If you can imagine the difference in the geology of Mississippi and Alabama. But, and our university was not open. It had not recovered, but by 1871, they raised one building, what we call Woods Hall. It's still used today. A school reopened in the fall of 1871, and Smith came as geology professor, and mineralogy too.
I think I remember in the foreword of your book there was something about Smith. Dr. Smith was here when Union troops actually burned the university buildings. Was that true?
Dr. Smith was here teaching cadets. It was wartime, and he was in the Confederate Army. Smith had been a private, but he was an officer now teaching cadets the ways of fighting war. And when the federal troops came in, Dr. Garland, who was president, wanted to save the cadets from being made prisoners, and so he ordered Smith and the other officers to take the cadets to I believe it was Selma, but then they got word Selma had fallen, and they went to Marion instead. But the interesting thing is, that morning, the cadets and Dr. Garland and Smith stopped at the bridge at Peterson. They saw the university being burned. They heard the explosion of the arsenal. But at the same time, at Rice Hospital on a balcony, Smith's future wife, Dr. Garland's daughter, was also watching the devastation, the burning of the university. And Smith's future mother-in-law went back to the president's mansion and found the Union troops burning, setting fire to it, and she ordered them to put out that fire and get out of her house, that this was a private residence. So, and then Mrs. Garland got the servants to help her spread wet quilts over the top of the mansion so that sparks from the burning buildings would not set the mansion afire. And that's how our presidential mansion was saved.
That is incredible. The president's wife saved the building.
Smith's future mother-in-law, don't forget that. Anyway, Smith, then they did get to Marion, and none of them were imprisoned. So, and in 1871, when the university finally reopened, Smith came back as a professor. But he did anything the university needed in order to rehabilitate itself. He served as a librarian. He served in any capacity that was needed. In addition to his teaching, he served, and he helped found the athletic programs. He loved baseball, but he helped start the football, all the athletics, and he helped start the University Symphony Orchestra. He played second violin in it. So he really was a marvelous instrument in getting Alabama, the university, and the state back on its feet.
Now, where was he born? Do you remember?
He was born in what's called Old Washington in Autauga County, but when he was quite young, his parents moved into Prattville. His father was a physician.
Right.
But Smith had no maps to guide him in his travels, and oftentimes sometimes he was lost, and there were no roads. And he one time he could not find the place that he was looking for, and so he and his driver set up camp, and they noticed a house that seemed to be occupied, and so they went there and said, "Where are we?" And the people said, "We don't know where we are. We just moved in yesterday." But there were no maps to help out Smith, but he worked to develop an accurate map of Alabama, and he developed such a most excellent one that for decades it was the standard map for everybody. It was so accurate. The legislature in 1873, when they reactivated the geologist position, they set aside money for a wagon for Smith to use. But in 1883, the Studebaker wagon arrived in Tuscaloosa, and it was luxurious. The description of it is just marvelous. But Smith then, from 1883 on, he had the wagon, and he would have a driver, and they would had mules. He had 2 mules that would pull the wagon. Usually one was John, old John, and one was Joe.
I think every library in Alabama should have this book on Dr. Smith, this amazing man, and so much of Alabama. He is so important to this state, and I can't imagine this state wouldn't have been what it is today without Mr. Smith. And Aileen, tell them how to get this book.
The book is at most bookstores, but also it's on the internet. And by the way, may I say a word for the Encyclopedia of Alabama? If you look up Dr. Eugene Allen Smith, he's in there. I'm in there. But many other interesting people are in the Encyclopedia of Alabama on the internet. It's a valuable resource. But and then I have at the Cahaba Lily Festival, May the 16th, I'll be signing Dr. Smith there, and that's a great day when the Cahaba lilies are blooming. Who wrote the book Blockton? He'll be there signing too. That's May the 16th. Wonderful dinner the ladies there serve.
Another great All right, tell us about this. John, you too.
Yes, so again, you've seen the wagon in the background, the diorama. These are other pieces of equipment, publications, various pieces of things that were taken to the field by Dr. Smith and used. So you can actually see some of these. Some of them look well worn because they were, in fact, used to create that map you saw on the wall.
You just had all that collection of material. Just tell us a little bit about all that you had to go through, letters and all that kind of thing.
Well, I had...
It took you 10 years, right?
Yes, I had Dr. Eugene Allen Smith's journal, which formed the framework. I did add to the book, and also newspaper clippings were very helpful. I found a great deal in newspapers. I really got too close to the Smith family in those 10 years. His sons spent money like water, and he some years could not make his insurance payment, and I worried for him. And then some years, Jenny, his wife, she could not buy a dress or have a dress made for her to attend a family wedding. And then
because, as you said, he was spending his own money out on these trips.
And yes, on many occasions he had to spend the money, his own money. But then their only daughter, Julia, died, and that really...
Did she die young?
She was about 30, and she was a linguist. She knew several languages. She taught in Tuscaloosa High School. She had the opportunity to go to North Carolina to teach, where she would have had higher pay and a better situation, but she decided she could not leave her family. She loved her family dearly. She looked after her brothers. She consoled them when they were short of money. She consoled them when they had problems of the heart. And Julia was just everything. She had Aunt Julia, Eugene's sister, for whom she was named, took her to Europe on 3 tours, I believe. And so she must have been a most interesting person. And she died in a tragic way. I cannot talk to you about it, but I had to stop writing for a while.
Oh, you were so touched by that.
I was so into this family. Anyway, that's one reason I'm not going to do nonfiction anymore.
This remarkable man, I didn't realize it until I asked you the question. I was amazed that he never retired. Mm-mm. He worked until 1927, until he...
Well, just before he died, he got word that the legislature had passed a bill he had asked for, and it raised the allotment to the state geological group.
Oh, yes. Didn't you mention to me once that he was instrumental in getting land grants or something in retribution for the damage the troops had done?
That's very important. He worked to get the federal government to repay the university for the destruction, and the university was granted, I believe it was 46,000 acres of land which it could sell or use in any way it needed to, and there were to be 3 land men to choose the acreage. And of course, Smith knew Alabama better than anybody. He'd been over to every county, and he was one of the 3 the governor appointed to choose the acreage. He knew which acres were important and valuable, and so he was a wise choice, and that's how we got this building. It came out of the monies from that
sale of the land?
From that, what the Smith and others who worked for to be repaid. So that was really, and another way that he served us in a wonderful way. In 1911, when automobiles were becoming more common, the governor appointed a highway commission to see to the roads and the regulations and all for the coming automobile era. And Smith was one of the 5 men chosen for the Highway Commission, and he went faithfully by train down to Montgomery to the meetings. Not have been. He was a marvelous influence on our university and our state.
And I don't know why I was surprised, but he was small in stature, you said.
He was 5'4", but he was a giant in our history, and the effect he had for good for our state. There's nothing about him we need ever be ashamed of before the rest of the country.
Oh. And he really, like you said, he sacrificed his personal fortune and his family to dedicate himself to do his life's work. He was dedicated.
He was really, really dedicated. 2 interesting biographers would be of Mrs. Smith, and also the wife of Dr. Garland.
Yes, yes. These ladies,
Yes,
they were special.
they were a power behind the throne, truly.
You are right.
The Smiths, Dr. Smith and his family were close to the head of Bryce Hospital. And when the federal troops invaded Tuscaloosa, Mrs. Garland took the children and hid in the woods in the night where Evergreen Cemetery is now. And when daylight came, she drove in the buggy over to the hospital, Bryce Hospital, where their friend Peter Bryce and his wife took them in. And that's why Jenny, Smith's future wife, could stand and look out the window from Bryce Hospital and oversee the campus burning next day.
Amazing.
And it was terrible, tragic.
Oh, it was. I don't see how anyone could burn books. I don't.
Such a loss.
Oh.
I could say about me, my kinfolks came into Alabama through Walker County.
That's exciting.
Some of them stayed in Walker County. They're the rich ones. The others came to Tuscaloosa. They're the poor ones, and they're my ancestors. Direct.
What year was that? Your ancestors came through Walker County.
Yes, they came from Georgia.
And their names, Aileen?
Ralph Elsie Kilgore.
Yes, the Kilgore name is big in Walker County. And Jasper. Yes. Oh, my.
But for some reason, some came on to Tuscaloosa.
About what year? Can you remember that they came in from Georgia?
I do know that 5 Kilgore brothers were in the fight against the British at Kings Mountain, South Carolina, and 3 of them were killed. 2 of them were killed outright. 1 was mortally wounded, and 2 of them survived the battle, fortunately, to be our forebears.
That's another book, Aileen.
Well, several of them remain. Margaret, I do want to tell you, change the subject back to the geologist.
Yes.
It's well worth a trip to Evergreen Cemetery to see the grave. Well, Dr. Smith and some of his family are buried there, but their markers are the usual. But to look up the tombstone of our first state geologist, Michael Toomey, the Irishman, it is really special and befitting a geologist. The the top for it's a Celtic cross for the Irish, made of silicaga marble, and it is implanted in a chunk of Red Mountain iron ore.
Oh my!
That is so suitable for a geologist.
But 10 years, you spent 10 years on this, Aileen? 10 years.
I had a great deal of help from that wonderful geologist I told you about, Louis Dean.
Can't say enough. It's just wonderful. Anything else you can think of while we're here, Aileen?
Well, here on the second floor, hanging from the ceiling, is a skeleton of Zeuglodon. Now, in one of my books, The Summer of the Bone Pile Monster, I bring in that Zeuglodon. It's a character almost in the book, but Smith wanted to collect a complete skeleton of a Zeuglodon.
John, tell people about the museum and how they can visit here.
All the things you've seen today related to Eugene Allen Smith on exhibit here at the Alabama Museum of Natural History are available. We encourage people to come in and see it. The museum's open Monday through Saturdays, 10 to 4:30, and it's free for people that are affiliated with the university, including students, and admission is only $1 or $2 for the general.
Okay, John, how will they contact you? And if people come in groups, do they need to let you know?
If you want to do a group, we prefer that you contact us. There's an email address on our website, which is amnh.ua.edu, and there's contact information there. If you would like to bring a group and would like a more in-depth tour, you can contact us and we can arrange that.
It's not to be missed, this wonderful museum. Thank you so much, Aileen Henderson. Just an extraordinary work, and it's just a phenomenal job.
Thanks for having me.
John, it's so good to be with you today and see these wonderful exhibits. I couldn't wait to see that Studebaker wagon.